Why should you create a connection with or to your fans? Stay tuned and find out.
Welcome. Okay, here's the question. Serious? How are we dark horses? You know, the ones everyone is betting against, the ones they don't expect to win, place, or even show on the track, and they'll even laugh on us when we talk about trying. How do we show the world our greatness and triumph? Come on. Well, that's the question, and this podcast will give you the answers. Let's go. This is The Dark Horse Entrepreneur. My name is Tracy Brinkman. And push it out.
What is up? What is up? What is up, my Dark Horse friends and family? Welcome back to your weekly dose of geeking out learning. I'm your Dark Horse host, Tracy Brinkman, and you, well, that, my friend, is infinitely more important. You are a driven entrepreneur or a business owner, or perhaps you're one in the making. Either way, you're here because you're ready to start, restart, kickstart, just start leveling up with some great marketing, personal, or business tips and results in order to build that beautiful business of yours into the empire it absolutely deserves to be. And that's why I'm here bringing on these guests that I think will bring that value to you and help deliver that value on this podcast. And if you want to keep getting that value, if I said value enough at this point, please make sure you go on down there and hit that subscribe button. And while you're down there, leave us a 5-star rating and some kind words in the reviews. Why? Well, because it is those subscribes, ratings, and reviews that tell the podcast platforms that you are getting that value there. I got to be able to say it again. And to help us reach more driven entrepreneurs, they might give us a little lift up in the podcast algorithms when you drop those subscribes, those ratings, and those reviews. So please take a moment, show the love, and help spread the word. All right, you know what I'm going to say right here, right? Yeah, another big episode today. Today, Jim and Luke, the con guys, are going to be talking about not being afraid of the competition, why you should broaden your horizons, why we should remember to put a twinkle back in our eye, and building variations of success. Plus, I'm going to let you in on next week's interview guest who offers a proven no bullshit method of positioning your business, service, or brand to get noticed. As per usual, the Dark Horse Corrals are chock full of personal, business, and marketing GOLD spilling from every corner of the Dark Horse Entrepreneur HQ. So let's get to the starting gates and go. Alrighty, my Dark Horse friends and families. Today's guests, Jim Cheeseman and Luke Fry. Now, they're coming to you straight from the nerdy heart of Hollywood, California. Yeah, coming to you right from the Con Guy Show, which is the official podcast of conguy.com, streaming into your home for discussions and views on fandom, Comic-Cons, pop culture, and anything you might be geeking out. All from the filmmaker's perspective, because, after all, they are filmmakers. Whew, these are my kind of guys. Let's see what lessons we can learn or glean from these amazing geeks and filmmakers who have started not one, not 2 or 3, but 5 podcasts, all for passionate audiences that they are a part of. All right, Luke Cheeseman and Jim Fry, welcome to the Dark Horse Entrepreneur, guys.
Oh, so glad to be here. So glad to be here.
I know I've been, no pun intended, I've been geeking out about this particular episode because of, you know, the kinds of things you guys focus on in your podcast, be it, I saw the episode about the Con Girls. You've been talking about Indiana Jones. Obviously, my man Luke is over there rocking the Con Guy Batman logo or that. All right. Jim's got his Marvel hat on. So there's a whole universe of things to talk about there. But before we even get there, I want to step back from the mic and let you guys tell the story that brought you to where you are today, doing the things you do, and why you love doing it so much.
Thanks for asking. Wow, what a deep question. What a long question. I mean, but the short answer is right now we have a podcast called The Con Guy. You can find it at theconguy.com or anywhere that you listen to podcasts. And it came about because we just enjoyed going to these fan conventions and what they were about. And we wanted to create something that could help connect fans together. And everyone's like, oh, but everybody's got a website out there. Everybody's got this. Everybody's got that. Most of these websites last about a year or two and they're gone. We've been around now for 5 years. And it's kind of a natural outgrowth of the fact that Luke and I were screenwriters. We're screenwriting partners, and Comic-Con is fertile ground for so much of what we write about, want to discover, and it's kind of cool. Hey, Luke, do you want to tell how you kind of got involved with this, your journey a little bit?
Into the con guy?
Sure, whatever your journey is, man.
Do you want the short answer, medium answer, or long answer?
Let's start with the medium answer.
Okay, cool. So we talked about this before we started the show. So I grew up watching a lot of, and if you're watching or see little snippets on screen, I like to decorate a lot of Batman 66 thing, the classic Batman and Robin. Got my little Robin figure here. So as a young kid, I started out watching Batman with my dad, and really it's kind of like a good bonding thing to have with your dad to watch Batman and Robin. And I started collecting figures and stuff. And I grew up kind of like somewhat in the country. So a lot of my life was kind of like somewhat like isolated because I didn't have a lot of like neighborhood kids to play with. I had my sister and maybe like one other neighbor and some other stuff. But a lot of times people would have to travel in to like hang out with us. Mm-hmm. So I had to learn at a young age to entertain myself, and, like having movies and going to the library and just other things and just practicing creativity and art, all that kind of stuff was a way of kind of occupying myself. And I've always been good at kind of like self-occupying or finding something to do. Like I don't get bored too easily because I've learned to like entertain myself throughout my life. So of course, learning how to draw, I kind of took that into kind of my school years and continued doing that, continued watching movies, collecting figures till about like middle school or so, until I kind of went more into like the sports thing, started playing football, doing all of that, and still kind of did some of the arts in the background. I didn't quite take it as serious as, I should or whatever. But then I ended up getting a football concussion and then ended up not being able to kind of like perform on other areas of my life. But the arts kind of was something that came naturally to me. So I was able to kind of continue drawing, which kind of got me a scholarship in the art school, because originally I was kind of thinking more maybe filmmaking, which I did end up coming back to, but it really kind of got me kind of stuck in a spot. And then I started playing music in a band and just doing all sorts of kind of creative stuff there locally in Columbus, Ohio, where I'm from. So I went to college, graduated, and actually I got in based on illustration, wanted to study graphic design, but then I realized if I studied photography, I could take a bunch of electives and almost learn a whole nother major. So I'm like, I'll still take my design classes, but I'm going to major in photography. Then taking photography, I discovered if I take 4 more classes, I could major in film, which kind of develops, a love of film that I had in my youth and, fandoms, all that. Like I also grew up watching like Back to the Future. Jaws was my favorite movie. So like there was all these fandoms that I had incorporated into my life that I was just kind of passionate about, but I didn't really think about long term. I just loved, different things and like creating stuff. And then I got into kind of starting to make movies on my own. So graduated from college, saved up money, worked in design for a year, moved out to LA, and started, realized how hard it is to just jump into stuff. When you come from a small town, you just think like, you pack your bags, you get on a plane, and you go to LA, and then stuff just happens, like right. The movies.
They're lining you up to take your resume, right?
Yeah. But, it's a process, like people say a lot of times it takes 7 years or more to like break into the industry, but you like being kind of young, hungry, and being in like band, going through the whole band craze too, like, oh, I'm going to be a successful band when I'm like 21 years old, going through all that stuff, and then it like not happening, but you just have that wild ambitious because you're still young and just wanting to go after things. So went out, to LA, started doing some acting, got me on movie sets, all this stuff. So then again, I was like getting into like being on set of like major movies and TV shows, which was just kind of a cool experience to like be like standing next to Clint Eastwood or like on, working on shows like ER where you're crossing behind like John Stamos and then working on like movies, like I worked on the movie The Hangover and just like other kind of films, because I love like comedy movies and all that other stuff. But like it just really got me into that environment. And then I decided, like I wanted to kind of learn producing. So I took a program that placed me on the Warner Brothers lot with another kind of big, fan thing is Lego. So like the company I was working for called Lynn Pictures, they were producing the Lego movie at the time. And it really kind of got me into the idea of developing stuff. And right around that same time I was doing Lynn Pictures, Jim started to get me into kind of the convention scene. And I went to my first convention, which was WonderCon. So I kind of didn't fully embrace like the, what people would call the nerdier side of yourself. I just consider it more creative, but a lot of times, growing up that could like isolate you or not feel like the cool kids. And I played football and other stuff. So it was a weird mix of like being somewhat of a jock, but then also being artistic and kind of finding the balance. Cause even when I went to art college, I didn't feel quite kind of like I fit in. So here I am walking into like WonderCon, which is like my first Comic-Con. Like, okay, I don't know if I necessarily want to be here or what exactly this is. But then they had these gigantic film panels with like Ridley Scott. My cousin is a famous actress, Maggie Grace, and she did a panel for a movie called The Lockout, which she did with Guy Pearce. So that was there. And then, me loving buddy movies, Jonah Hill and Channing Tatum were there promoting 21 Jump Street. And they gave out like a free screening to go see the movie. I can't remember if we saw it there or not, but it was cool seeing these film panels. But it wasn't until I hit the convention floor and then I was rediscovering what I mentioned before, like the figures when I was a kid, like seeing these Robin figures. I was like, it stirred up this nostalgia factor that was within me that brought that kind of childlike thing, which I think is really important to know what that is in your life. For my dad, it was taking him to see Paul McCartney because he never got to see the Beatles before, but you see that childlike twinkle, in their eye, and everybody might have that one thing, whether it's a stuffed animal, whether it's a movie. And that's what's good about the convention scene is that they do that. So I ended up going to Comic-Con that same year, and then me and Jim kind of created a pattern of continuing going to these things. And then Jim had an internet business and was thinking like, hey, I'd like to start, a website focusing on, because, Comic-Con has a separate website that's connected to WonderCon. And then there's all these other conventions, and he wanted to create a unified thing that kind of talked about all the conventions going on that, people as a fan could kind of go to. And I helped create the original logo that he's wearing on his shirt. That's actually his face wearing a mask. And he's like, hey.
Well, I got yellow sunglasses upstairs, and when I put them on, I look a little bit. There's more hair on this cartoon than are actually on my real head now. So.
But he can wear a hat.
Yep.
But yeah, that basically kind of brings in to the con guy part. Which Jim, do you want to give some backstory before we go?
Oh yeah, let me give my backstory real quick. And I'll make mine kind of condensed here. Like if someone were to ask me why I ended up in the creative fields that I'm in, I just got to say it's my mom and dad. When I was 4 years old, they gave me a chalkboard. So I started drawing. And when I was a little kid, I started drawing out stories. And then when I was like 10 years old, I started drawing my very first comic strip. I mean, I actually drew it out, printed it, copied it, and passed it out to people in the neighborhood. I got a typewriter at age 12. I remember that. And then I started typing and I kind of never looked back. And then there was that Christmas right around age 12, my mom and dad got me a subscription to a bunch of different comic books because my first comic book was 1979 John Byrne. It was an Avengers comic book, which I loved. I have since found that comic book at comic book shows and I have it upstairs. It's something it's kind of like, what do you call it? It's like the source document of my life a little bit.
Right on.
It's kind of weird, but I got those subscriptions. I started mowing my aunt's lawn when I was in middle school to raise enough. And I'd get my monthly money from her mowing her lawn and go to the comic book store, grab my comic books. And it was great. But then like most people, I hit like upper middle school, high school. I discovered girls in sports and I kind of stopped the comic book thing. But I remember when I was in high school, we had to make these future looking books of what we were going to do with our lives. And I said, I wanted to be a writer. That's all I wanted to be. Cause ever since I got that typewriter and I had written already, I started writing what I thought were books or screenplays. And I was going to town and I had teachers that said, you need to be a writer. You need to be a writer. And so I developed that skill of writing, which is, if I'm being honest, like the only skill I really have. So I needed to make sure that it was going to work out for me. But, I went to college to be a writer. No, in high school, I said, I want to work in newspapers. I chartered my course. I'm going to do newspaper work and then I'm going to move into magazines. I'm going to move into books and I want to end up working out in Hollywood. That was my goal. I wanted to make movies. I wanted to make filmed entertainment. Went to college to be a writer. And that meant, you take all the English classes and stuff. And when you do that, they always try to push you towards being a teacher. I said, no, I don't want to be a teacher. Nothing against teachers.
Right.
But I wanted to be a writer. So I didn't take any teaching classes. I took writing, all the writing classes and writing internships. And then my first job out of college, I was a teacher, of course. for 2 years, but then I made the jump back into writing. I got into business writing, and I finally landed jobs at magazines. Got married, moved to another state, pursued this writing, worked in some more magazines, and then some more magazines. I was like, you started as the copy editor, then you move up to the associate editor.
What was it?
I started in, let me see. I was born in Rockford, Illinois. That's where all this stuff was happening. I moved south to South Carolina, met my then wife. We moved to Tennessee. And then from Tennessee, I moved to Florida. When I was in Florida, I jumped on board a bunch of different magazines, a lot of fun magazines, car magazines, sports magazines, water skiing magazines. That was a good time. But then I made the jump to my writing career lasted longer than my marriage. Let's just put it that way. Because I decided, because the whole time I kept on thinking, okay, I'm following that route, but I was always pointed towards Hollywood, pointed towards filmmaking, and I didn't know how to do it. So way back many years ago, about 15 years ago, I said, I'm going to do it. So I took off to Hollywood, California, and I landed a job at a magazine company, of course, but then I moved over to one of the big Hollywood film production companies here. I don't want to say which one, because I still work there. It's my day job. And I love that job. But then what was funny is I moved, once I got back into the creative endeavors out here in Hollywood, I saw, what? Those comic books that I loved as a kid, all of a sudden they're super popular again. And I remember I think the year was, a long time ago, 2005 or 6. I went to my very first San Diego Comic-Con on a whim. It was just a lark. A friend one Saturday afternoon said, you want to drive down? Sure.
Yeah. Well, you could just get tickets last minute, right?
Oh yeah.
So we went
that's
down.
So easy to do.
We went to Comic-Con, and all of a sudden my world of my childhood just opened back up to me. And it was like, the proverbial, like the sun shining down from the heavens. And I was back. I mean, I was hooked immediately. And then a couple of years later, I started going every year. I've not missed a year since then, except for these COVID years. But then, the things like I was out here to do screenwriting, but I was doing everything else. But so me and Luke, we met up, we became screenwriting partners, but there was also a shakeup in the entertainment industry and things were shaky. So me and some colleagues, we started like a boutique internet communications agency. And from that, and that's kind of like, we're not doing a lot of work there right now, but the one thing that we did do that really kind of blew up was we started this thing called theconguy.com, a website. And we started it because I had rediscovered my love of what this was. I wanted a website that could bring people together at the different conventions. And then we brought Luke in and we said, hey, you want to be a partner in this? And he came in as the partner. He does a lot of the video editing, designing, and he's the producer for our show and social media director. And they just kind of, from there, we got pulled into a studio called AfterBuzz Studios and Popcorn Talk. And they pitched us the idea of us doing a show for them. And that's how our podcast was born. It was about 4 years ago. And we're now at that hashtag show, not because of any bad blood with Popcorn Talk. It's just through COVID and different things. They're on pause for a while. They're kind of reforming. And now we've kind of branched out a little bit. We have the Con Guys, which is our main show. Then we started about 2 years ago, the Scare Guy, which is the scarier side of the Con Guy. We're not super gory, super dark, but just a lot of good fun Halloween horror nights and horror movies. Mm-hmm. And then we have recently launched the Con Girls. Our newest thing is the Con Kids. And of course, you probably can't see on the wall, but behind me, there's a tiki bar. That's for the Tiki Freaks, which is our final show that we have launched, all about tiki culture. So that is the long and short of it. And the reason that it works is because the interest that we have at these conventions melds so seamlessly with our screenwriting, meeting industry folks. And if it didn't, it would be impossible because there's not enough hours in the day to do everything that we try to do. That's my short story. And it's way too long.
Those are cool stories. I think a couple of things that resonated with me is back when Luke was sharing about not embracing his nerdier side, right? He was a jock. And I think we're all guys here. Huh? I'm a guy. I'm gonna guess you guys are too. Anyway, it became kind of like, well, it's not so cool to like Batman or any of those things. And here's the thing: my dad was in the military, and my just before teen years, we were stationed in Europe, over in southern Germany, and I loved it. And I got into gymnastics. that was my sport.
Yeah.
Sport, right? And I got into competitive men's gymnastics, doing the iron bar and
cool.
the whole 9 yards, the pommel horse and everything. And my dad decided to exit the military, 23 years, decided to retire, and he wanted to settle into Southern California. So I go from this structured environment to Southern California.
Yeah.
Dramatic pause here, right? And so I went from, all that structure to probably the most liberal place on the planet, let alone in the United States. And
in screenwriting, we call that the midpoint, when everything changes.
Everything changes, right? And here was the real sad part. When I get to my new high school, I'm an 8th grader. And first off, thing one, the scholastic level of the school I was going into was 2 years behind where I was already at. They were trying to teach me stuff I'd learned 2 years ago. So now I'm getting bored with school. So I think I'll throw myself at my sports to keep myself entertained. And they had a gymnastics class for men, but there was no competition. You could go there and you could work out and that was it. And I thought, man, this sucks. So what I had become? A cheerleader. Oh my God. Oh. But here was my angle.
Southern California, that had to be nice.
Yeah, that was my angle. I said, everyone was going, why don't you do football or track or something? Well, I'm too damn little to do football. I was like 4'3" in the 9th grade. That was out, right? Baseball just didn't interest me. Pretty women and doing flips, I was all for that. So cheerleader seemed to be a natural course. So obviously, I still wasn't an embracing my nerdy side, but at some level, I didn't give a crap, right? Anyway, I wanted to.
That's cool.
I wanted to. There was one other story I have to share when you were talking about your chalkboard and drawing comics, right? And one of my English teachers, when my grandfather had passed away while we were in Germany, my parents had to leave Europe to go attend to some things here in the States, and so I was 12, 13 at the time, there by myself, which is every little kid's dream, right? Hey, the parents are gone. But, I was a little busted up. I was pretty close with my parents. And she started assigning me these extracurricular activities, like I was reading The Tattooed Man by Ray Bradbury, which is an excellent book. But then she said, read The Fantastic Voyage.
Yeah.
Awesome book. And then instead of doing a regular report, you can pick from one of this sheet of things. And one of the things on the sheet was doing a comic book version of the Fantastic Voyage. So I sat down and created probably, I'm trying not to exaggerate, it must have been a 24 to 30 page comic book, maybe 6 panels per page. And of course, every once in a while, like all the good comic books, you have the big 2 panels that something exciting is happening. And to this day, I always remember sitting down and drawing that. Now, the people drawing skills probably weren't that great, but just the act of going through and taking the story and putting it into sections where you can't tell the whole story. So you have to, put some excitement or something into the panel that pulls them out. That's a skill in and of itself. When you say
100%, and I have so much admiration for what you did there. That's what people don't understand. It's like when someone says, Jim, what did you do to become a writer? How did you develop your writing skills? It's comic books. When I was a kid, I read comic books and tried to recreate stories in comic books. The language in comic books was it was at that, comic books are science fiction. They use science language and big language. And that's what did it for me. There was 2 things that improved my writing. The first is comic books. That's the biggest thing. And I read a lot, but comic books. And then the second was when I moved away from Illinois to South Carolina, there was a girl that I left behind in Illinois in the 9th grade that I was in love with. And I would write her 3 letters a week. And these letters were 10 pages long back when people wrote letters. Oh, and boy, oh boy, did I develop some writing skills back then.
I bet.
and to your point, like the thing that was cool about, you're talking about like Jules Verne, Journey to the Center of the Earth, they had a graphic novel, the comic book version of that when I was in middle school or high school. And I did a book report on that. The teacher never knew. I just told her I did a book report on Jules Verne, Journey to the Center of the Earth. I didn't tell her it was a comic book, but I got an A on that paper. And that just proves to you how great that is.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, man, where do we take this? I think here's one of the things I wanted to dig in here, because I'm just going to take this in a total geek mode. I'm a geek. I'm good with. As I was showing Luke earlier, we're sitting in my little podcast studio. Is actually my KISS room, right? This is where I have all my KISS paraphernalia and everything. And when Luke is talking about collecting those characters and how and then you mentioned it too, Jim, you brought out that childlike quality. And when you see those things out there on the floor, I experience a lot of that at those cons, but also when I go out and I find these gems from the 70s, right? You know, the old Tiger KISS record player. It took forever to find one, but before we finally found one, and it's sitting over here and it's in great condition. And there's just something magical when you find that, right? What, as you see these cons and more, I'll call it is it fandom when they're creating their own alternate universe version of storylines, right? Is that
it's what you call it, fanzines, you call it fan fiction. People,
right?
Yeah, like the book, the whatever shades of gray. How many?
Yes, 50
shades. However many shades it is. That started as fan fiction for the Twilight books.
Yeah,
and people do that. A lot of people in Hollywood started working in fan fiction. So yeah, you're correct. Fan fiction.
Yeah. Now, is there pros and cons to that? Do you think that when it comes to it, and I ask this because you guys are on the inside looking out, I'm on the outside looking in. When some of that fan fiction becomes popularized in the fan universe, I would imagine, do they then kind of alter the universe, right? To mold to that, like, everyone loves everyone loves Tracy's version of what happened to Gene Simmons, in the KISS universe that he's come up with. Maybe we should add that into the KISS, universe of comic books, which I have a bunch of, by the way.
KISS comic books were a hot property for a while. We have a friend, he's a frequent contributor to our show, that he's a big KISS collector. The action figures, the comics. To your question though, and Luke, I don't know what you think, but we have seen over the years, and more in the area of screenwriting, like, because Luke and I, we write screenplays, and so we're kind of aware of what's going on in that market. Writers, for the longest time, didn't respond a lot. It didn't seem like to fan involvement or comments or fan fiction, but it does seem like today you almost have to. You have to be hyper aware of what's going on in the fanverse. And I'm not saying that it's a good part. The bad part of that is what we call, toxic fandom, which is something that is erupted where fans, if they hate something, they let people know about it, and they can drive people off of social media. And there's like actors or writers that, they're like, well, forget it then. We won't try to make it better for you. We'll just cancel the show. And that's the sad downside of it. But on the bright side, I think a lot of writers, they are very active on social media. They read the message board. That's an old word these days, but they keep up with what the fans are saying. They listen to the podcast. And I think a lot of them have said, they respond to it. Like characters that are beloved might get bigger storylines or whatnot. I don't know, Luke, have you seen some of that as well?
The thing I would have to say about the whole fan fiction or fan films or, the rebooting or reimagining of something is, I think as a fan, if you do it on a lower level, it could be a little more fun, and kind of respected. Like if I decide I'm going to make a Spider-Man video and I'm going to film it online, do kind of like a web series or whatever, I don't think it'll get as much shade as if a famous director or somebody decided I'm going to come in and do it as some big gigantic franchise. For some reason, people, I think, become a lot more judgmental when you're doing it from a studio level versus more of a fan level. Like the expectations just go different. It's such a difficult thing to tread on because it's very hard to get the nostalgia and kind of the update to modernize something. Like there's very rare times.
Do you have an example of that's happening right now, Luke?
Yeah. Not to date the show, but yes, it's going on big time with the Masters of the Universe
whole on Netflix.
Because people, love the old show. And unfortunately, I didn't really grow up on it or see it, but I'm seeing friends around me kind of debate about it, how they modernize and chose different directions. And the same thing kind of with the Star Wars, has been a very difficult one, but it's very rare to like see something that they bring back and do it better, in my opinion. I think Marvel's done a great job of, like bringing, some of the older things and doing like a newer take on it. They've done the same thing with Batman, like Christopher Nolan did a really good take of Batman. But then I know that now the Zack Snyder ones have struggled as far as the Batman character goes. And some of the stuff like the first Wonder Woman did good, but it's kind of been mixed for DC on good and bad things. But we're hoping DC's headed kind of in a better direction that the fans will love. But Marvel. But
Luke, when you talk about DC, one of the biggest movies on HBO Max this year is directly a direct result of fan demand. Mm-hmm. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, you barely get this ability to do it. And I wish kind of in a way people could do it more, where they took Zack Snyder's cut that was just torn apart. His daughter passed away during the making of the film, and then he had to kind of
Justice League
as director. And then came Joss Whedon to kind of take over and kind of almost redid a lot of it and kind of did his own thing. But some of it could have been closer to Zack Snyder's original vision, but the studio and Zack Snyder uses this opportunity like, hey, we can put our hands back in this and fix everything that we think people hated about the first one and kind of give a redo, which you almost wish like, oh, can they do that on Star Wars?
But it was directly, but to Luke's point, it was tied directly into the demand from fans. And that's probably one of those examples of where the demand from fans created this whole new thing. Back in the day, they used to have letter writing campaigns when a show was being canceled, and they'd bring it back for a season. Or I remember, was it?
You're now listening to the Dark Horse Entrepreneur Podcast.
When Taxi was canceled, but there was a letter writing campaign, and then it got picked up by like a different network altogether.
Right
now, it's just like social media and outrage online. But the Snyder Cut. Wow, that just got so much attention, and it became like the center of the nerd universe earlier this year, and it resulted in probably a much better product than what was put out originally.
I think that's a great example. I think there was one. Oh God, it was either The Flash on Netflix or it was the Green Arrow, because I know we were kind of watching them, and I say we as in my wife and I, we're both geeks. We were watching them kind of in tandem, and they do align at a number of points where they cross over and introduce the characters to each other's shows. But there was a character, and I want to say it was the Black Canary. It may not have been, it may have been a different one, but she was killed off.
Yeah.
Right. And then the social media buzz started. Oh, you can't do that. The Black Canary did way more things than what we've seen, and yada yada yada. And all of a sudden, about a season and a half later, she's back on from their alternate universe storyline. You're like, okay, well, maybe they planned it. Maybe it's as a response to the fan demand, and I don't blame them. It was good. I enjoyed the character and the way they wrote her back in and continued on with her, and they gave them more opportunities to do things with her that weren't in her original storylines, which that's when you almost get to the purist versus the let's just enjoy the character. It's like, well, they never did that. Okay, well, it's not 1960 anymore either. That's good,
But that's the thing, is that people complain about that. You got to say the comic books have always done that. Nobody's ever dead in a comic book.
Right.
They can always come back. They always find a way back. And I remember one of those comic books that I was subscribing to, the first time one of my favorite characters experienced a death was her name was Marionette. It was in the Micronauts comic book, which is supposedly becoming either a film or a movie soon. But anyways, Baron Karza was the bad guy, and he shot this ray at her and he dissolved her. She was reduced to atoms. And I was like, oh my gosh, one of my favorite characters is gone. But then you find out she's been reduced to atoms, which means she slipped into the microverse. So they found this weird way to make sure she wasn't dead, and the thing that's cool, and Luke, you can talk about this as well. The movies, both DC and Marvel, have caught up to the concept of the multiverse. Mm-hmm. The multiverse in Marvel is splitting wide open right now. I don't want to ruin it for anybody, but Loki split open that microverse. We're about to see many, many different storytelling angles from many different directions. DC, they kind of had their multiverse, but like their next Batman movie, or was it Flashpoint, which introduced us to different timelines and different multiverses. We're going to have apparently Bruce Michael Keaton's coming back for a part. And then the new Spider-Man movie, we might be seeing multiple versions of the Spider-Man. Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield from the different Spider-Man franchises. And
definitely the villains have been confirmed. Like,
yeah.
And,
nice.
Yes, right.
Jamie Foxx's, what was that character again? Jamie
Foxx? He was all Electro.
Yeah.
So I love that we're getting into this era, and a lot of people are freaking out. Like, oh no, that means if people are dead, they're not going to stay dead. People are like, if they're dead, you need to keep them dead. I'm like, you people have never read comic books. They always come back. Get over it.
Right. Even Captain America came back in the comic books.
That's right. Who knows? He might come back.
Yeah. Who was? Oh my God. Who was it? Okay. You know, the Nemesis, is it Kang?
Yep.
Who was he? Isn't there a storyline where he had to go back to literally kill his original self to become the Kang that he is? And it creates almost like this loop where he has to go back, otherwise he doesn't exist. So he has to go back. Anyway, your head can spin.
He's the perfect villain for the multiverse because he is from the future, but he exists in like 25 different timelines. He's the perfect villain for what we're about to get into.
Absolutely. All right. I got to jump off here because you mentioned, obviously, Luke, you mentioned that Jaws was your favorite movie. So
yeah,
you've already mentioned what your favorite movie is. So the follow-up question would be, why Jaws? Great movie. Not knocking it.
Well, I think like any kid naturally has a fascination to sharks and stuff. It's just, there's something cool about the mystery and just they look freaking cool, like
right.
As a kid, you're at the aquarium like, oh, what's that? And you're just obsessed with the shark, or you see toys, you're obsessed with that. So when I was a little kid, this is kind of like a weird thing with Jaws. Like the first time I watched it, I was like scared to watch the shark parts. Like it was kind of like a scary. So I almost had like a little bit of fear kind of mixed in with it, which, and then when I got in 6th grade, then I was like able to kind of like watch that one and watch all the movies. So like my friends did like a slumber party, kind of like up all night, kind of like watch all 4 Jaws movies back to back. So
right.
There's a nostalgia factor. But then as a filmmaker, you see it later in life and you're like, wow, the story and the filmmaking. And it's almost like watching a novel, the way these 3 men go out and go after the sharks. So it's like every time I watch it, I learn to appreciate more. And then especially having like the Steven Spielberg kind of thing to it, that kind of was inspiring as a filmmaker. So there's just so many layers to it that has that kind of like, primal fear / love of sharks, as a kid. Then the nostalgia factor of like watching it with your friends in your life, and then studying filmmaking, loving Spielberg, and plus all the other nostalgic Spielberg movies that are kind of like tied into that. It just,
absolutely.
There's so much. And I'm definitely not alone on this because the Jaws fandom is such a big thing. And especially like as a collector, like up on my shelf, like I have a lot of Jaws stuff. Like if you buy something Jaws and then they stop making it, it almost like quadruples or more in value. Like I bought like a figure for probably like $10 and now it's worth probably like $200. Like stuff just,
it's crazy.
If you buy Jaws stuff, like there's something about it that just still has this craze 45 plus years later.
Isn't that nuts? Quick add-on story to that about the nostalgia behind it. So obviously I loved it as a kid, right? There was that fear factor originally. And when we settled in California, I obviously became a surfer. I loved getting out there in the beach. So there was a factor around that. You're like, oh shit, that could happen. So fast forward to the 90s, my daughter is born. My second daughter is born, and she gets to about, I think she was about 7 or 8. And you were like, hey, can we watch Jaws? Can we watch Jaws? So I'm like, yeah, sure. But I want to be there, because if she gets too scared, you want to monitor that. So we did. We all huddled up in Dad's bed, turn the TV on, turn the lights down. My 8-year-old is like cuddled up. You got their head on the shoulder. And then the epic scene, the first one where he comes up out of the water and he snatches the girl, not the one where she just does that little bop, the one, that big one when he finally takes her down. She was so shocked. And I didn't do the whole cliche dad thing where you go, boo, right? I'm like, I'm going to let her enjoy this. He came up out of that water for that one, and she sat up and said, shit, 8 years old. She goes, oh, shoot, I'm sorry. But so for me, that memory has shifted from the fear of the kid to that moment with my daughter. So all that is rolled together for me in that amazing film. Okay, Jim, I gotta ask you.
Still work just with that, just the jump scares. Like I'll show my nephew, even like to this day, or my niece, they'll still jump at that. And we interviewed on our show Joe Alves, who designed the shark and had so much the strategic stuff behind it. But something great about the film is the jump scares still work, and that adds kind of that timelessness to it.
Right? Yeah, it's crazy. Okay, Jim, your turn. Favorite movie and why?
All right. There's two of them that are at the top of my list, but there's one that I would say that absolutely. There's one movie that changed the course of my life, and it's gonna sound old hat and like, oh, of course, it's Star Wars. It is the movie that changed the course of my life. It made me want to be a filmmaker. It came out in 1977. I think I saw it back then. Movies would stay in the theater for about a year or two. The Star Wars was in theaters for like 2 years straight.
Yeah. And
I remember I saw it at the drive-in theater with my parents. Of course, there was an advertisement right before the movie for this shark movie called Jaws, which we came back 2 weeks later to watch. It was a great summer for me as a kid.
Right.
But Star Wars, it changed my life. It made me want to, and when I told you about that story I started writing when I was 12 years old, that comic book I was drawing, I was so influenced by Star Wars. I was making my own space fantasy. So that's what pulled me in, and it changed it. And like to this day, and I remember, when I still lived up in Rockford, Illinois, I bought this this album of the entire movie on this album, and I kind of memorized the movie like line for line, and because I would listen to it every night when I was going to sleep, and it just kind of became so much a part of my psyche that like even like the chirps of R2D2 or the mumblings of the Jawas, I don't love you. You can still kind of say them sort of, them, and then that's why when I went to Comic-Con, I was like so blown away by like, wow, there's this whole world of Star Wars geeks that are here, and they know more about it than I ever will. And cool fact, Star Wars, the movie, first made its debut in 1976 San Diego Comic-Con before anybody had ever even heard of it.
Wow. I did not know that. Nice. Here's an interesting question. So obviously, I think the bulk of us have come up in that same time frame, right? We remember back the mid 70s, the amazing summer of movies, and all the movies have come out since then. And, being the geek that the Star Wars guy, right? I remember I got coined the Kiss guy for the longest time because I had the Kiss notebooks in high school, the whole 9 yards, dressed up like Kiss for every Halloween, makeup, would make my own costumes. One time, me and my three buddies, we dressed up. I was Gene Simmons, Robbie was Paul Stanley, and Jacob was Peter Criss, right? And two of us got our girlfriends to dress up like the girls from Love Gun, right? So if you remember the skimpy outfit, fishnet stockings, white face, and all 9 yards. And we went to Los Cerritos Mall in Southern California on a Saturday to go to one of those like Olin Mills kind of studios to get our pictures taken.
Oh, did you really?
We got stopped a number of times because people actually thought we were who we were.
Wow.
Of course, all of them except for one, a father and his little boy comes up and says, please don't tell him you're not them. Right.
That's awesome.
Right. He's just like, the little boy was like, oh, wow. He was so excited. Yeah. And he was the one, please don't tell him. He's super.
So you were cosplaying way back before cosplaying was even a thing.
And that's where I was going with this.
Oh, okay.
We probably did these kinds of things. Well, I did. I just admitted to it on my podcast. But now it's cool to do these things. You got whole cosplay groups, and Dragon Con has blown up, and I've been to Dragon Con. I haven't been lucky enough to go to Comic Con in San Diego, but I've been to the Chicago Comic Con, Atlanta, and a number of other of the next size down ones. Do you think it's because we are now the parents and we're like, I did that as a kid, that's cool, or is it just it's more accepting as these movies get so popular and everything?
When people ask me about the comic, like San Diego Comic-Con, I think this year is its 52nd or 53rd year. It started 1970 was the first one, so it's 52. And they've always, and there's this cool podcast series right now being put out by iHeartRadio called The History of Comic-Con, which tells the history of Comic-Con and where it came from. But I think that the explosion of Comic-Con, and they're hinting at it, they're going to talk about it this week, was, I'm pretty sure it's like, is it 2009, the year that Robert Pattinson brought Twilight Zone to not Twilight Zone, Twilight.
Mm-hmm.
And because before that, it was still considered, you could still buy tickets to these conventions. It was niche. But then all of a sudden, this whole gigantic group of teen girls and their mom shows up at Comic-Con and camp out overnight. We're talking like 5,000.
Yeah.
They camped out and for like days. And then the next time they were coming, it was for weeks. And that kind of changed the face of Comic-Con. And then it was also the onslaught of when Marvel Studios in 2008 started Iron Man and started the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Comic-Con became a different thing. It exploded in popularity. But I'm getting away from your question. You were asking something about, do I think, is it cooler now?
I think you've kind of answered that. Why do you think it's kind of made that transition from being uncool, right, to, man, it's super cool? Or maybe it's just my opinion. Maybe I just think it's cool.
It's the dominant pop culture stuff now. Like pop culture is dominated by Marvel and DC, and it's also dominated by fantasy and Star Wars. Like it's movies and television. It's just the proliferation of Stranger Things. You know, we still have like the biggest shows coming out are always these big, for lack of a better, they're not necessarily sci-fi genre shows, you know, and Star Trek, here we are 50 some years past Star Trek and they're having their own conventions. It's, you know, we like to say the geeks have inherited the earth, but if you were to ask me, do I think it's going to keep growing? I don't think so. I feel as if we've plateaued.
Yeah.
I think for one thing, I don't think it can get bigger, but a lot of the conventions are starting to eat at each other. There's some of them are starting to go away. And I think we're going to, as sad as it sounds, we're going to come to a place where we're going to have, you know, whereas now we have a comic book convention almost in every city in America. Those are probably not going to always be around.
Yeah.
The big ones will, but I hope to get to Dragon Con this year. I think I'm going down.
Oh man, I got lucky enough one year. A friend of mine who was in the film, right? He did local filming in Atlanta. His boom boy ditched out on him at the 11th hour. So he calls me up like a Thursday night before Dragon Con and says, dude, I need you to be the boom boy for me tomorrow, Friday. And I'll give you this guy's pass, which was a 3-day all access pass. All you have to do is walk around and just hold the microphone wherever I'm in. And he was going to be doing interviews with like, you know, Lou Ferrigno and, you know, the lady that played the Catwoman in the original, all these, and all these folks that were going to be there. I'm like, yeah, right. I'll do that all day long. And it was so cool to be from a kind of a behind the scenes thing. I was just a regular guy at that point. And to see that, you know what, these guys are just regular folk. They just have a really cool job. And then I got to go back on Saturday and, you know, just do everything I wanted to do. And just, here's another thing I think really for me brought up cons is the energy of being amongst those that really enjoy the same thing you do, right? Whether you like Batman or, you know, old Batman or new Batman, you liked Batman. All right, you guys could all get together. You may disagree on whether this person Michael Keaton was the best Batman or, you know, Christian Bale was the best Batman. You could get into that battle, but at the end of the day, y'all love Batman, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. You know, what you just said is like our country right now, it seems like this past 5 or 10 years has become, if not long, so polarized along political lines. I mean, it's just like, if you know somebody's a different political party than you see, or these days, it seems like that becomes your enemy. And that's so terrible. It's an awful thing. Yeah. But Comic-Cons, it's so weird. You walk in and just what you described, and Luke, you can talk about this. Like you walk in and there's a million different fandoms, people of all different interests, but everyone there just loves the fact that it's a shared tribe and they're there. And it's like, you know, just a friendly place. And like Luke, the first time we took him, he was a little bit apprehensive about if it was going to be for him or not. But what was it that got you hooked, Luke?
Yeah, I said that on my section that, you know, just seeing the collectibles and the things that bring kind of like the nostalgia and seeing kind of the film panels kind of brought me in. But back with the one statement, I would say that, you know, I think it is a unifying thing in person because it seems like a lot of the kind of the toxic fandom that we talk about sometimes I think happens more online. People like to kind of quietly have their opinions and kind of do that. But when everybody's in person, it's nice to see more kind of the unity about it. But, but yeah, it can be toxic behind the scenes. But, when it comes down to it, we're all fans of things and we're all there together.
And like Luke's making a great point. We have a friend, his name's Greg. He's a therapist and psychologist. And he says that there's studies that show that because we're trying to figure out what is up with this toxic fandom online, and people just tear each other to pieces and they just get so mean and so nasty. But when they show up in person, that kind of melts away a little bit, and you can have disagreements, but you still like each other. And studies have shown that if you can see somebody's eyes, you are much less likely to be hateful in what you say towards them. But the minute that it's an anonymous thing online and someone's opinion crosses you, you're more tempted to tear into them. So we need Comic-Con conventions. They're saving the world.
There it is.
Until they discover that they could probably do exhibition boxing matches and have people debate a topic and get so angry and then throw boxing gloves on them. And people could
that's hecka funny. I think one of the other things I like about the cons is, and I just say cons in general, right? The pop culture cons, the dragon cons, the comic cons. And I think for the most part, a lot of them are starting to blend together, right? So a comic con is really grown into this pop culture event where you've got movies and comic books and some music is even brought into the mix, right?
And wrestling.
And wrestling and anime, and it's all these different things, this whole pop culture arena brought together. But where I was originally going was the people that come in there in these amazing costumes. You look at them. I saw a guy come in there with what's the one, the Hulk, where he's like the big tank and it's super. I can't remember the name of it.
The Hulkbuster costume.
The Hulkbuster. Thank you very much. As soon as you said it, I knew it was right. He was walking in with that, and the thing was like 9 feet tall. Wow. And he's walking through, and I'm like, holy beep! You insert expletive here, and then you see another one I saw was How to Train Your Dragon. There was one person in the dragon costume walking around all bent over in the wings. And then the other person was dressed up like the guy character who was the trainer of the dragons. And I was like, just the amazing costumes that you see from the simplest all the way to the most extravagant, like the Hulkbuster. You're like, what is up with these folks? They take it to a whole new level.
That's crazy. Yeah, they really do. And like I myself don't get into cosplay very much. Luke's been pretty good at it. He had a costume one year that got him on television on the Sci-Fi Network, standing up front and with a group. But they pulled him up front and said, "We want you in front so we can feature you." It was really kind of cool.
Okay, what was the costume, Luke?
So it was during the whole kind of thing when Negan was introduced to The Walking Dead. So they had this like crazy season finale basically where they lined all these like main character type people up, and then Negan basically beat one of them to death from a POV perspective, and you didn't know who died. Right. So based on what Negan said of like, oh, this guy is the tough one or something, like I'm like, who is most likely to have that response that he would kind of say that? And I was like, that sounds like something he'd say to Abraham, who I predicted. So I constructed a plastic wiffle ball bat, made it look like a bat with a wire around it, put a headband on it and had it stuck to my head and dressed like him with blood kind of going down. And that's who I predicted it would be. And then I'd walk by all these people, they're like, no, is that who it is? And like all these people react. And then Sci-Fi Channel did something where they had Norman Reedus and Stephen Young from The Walking Dead on, and then they saw me out in the crowd, they pointed to me and all that, but they'd already kind of strategically placed me in the front, and they kept kind of moving me to where I was in like camera shots. But I was like, that's cool. Very featured. And even, what's that one lady that comes on the show a lot? She even kind of pointed me out in the crowd.
Comes on our show a lot?
No, she goes on The Walking Dead.
Right. You bet Nicole Brown.
Yeah.
Nicole Brown, she's a big fan. And like, not only that, he got on Sci-Fi, but like that, it was such a cool costume. And he was spot on. He looked like the character from the series. I mean, look at him right now. He doesn't look anything like him. So he, painted his hair red and grew out the mustache. And and did it. But then he was also, there was a magazine that did, the top 50 costumes from Comic-Con that year for cosplays. And Luke was featured on one of those. So it was kind of cool. And we have somebody else on our show. Her name's Katie. And she's actually kind of a professional costumer. She's worked in costuming for the studios, and she does it for productions, and she does commissions. People pay her to create cosplays. She's so good. She is so good. And what's cool. It's become part of her life passion now. And so she's making it part of her career goals. And so
nice.
It's really cool.
You never know where those things can take you. I mean, obviously, you guys have traveled some varied paths to get where you're at, and who knows what's on the horizon. I mean, I know you've mentioned, oh God, what was it? You got the scare guy, you got the tiki guy, the con girls, the con kids. Who knows what's on the horizon, right?
Yep. We just want a big billionaire to step in and buy it and make us rich. Just kidding.
Exactly.
They're not kidding. Trust me. All right, guys, I appreciate you coming on, hanging on, and yucking it up with me. If anyone wants to learn more about Luke Cheeseman, Jim Fry, the con guys, and everything else you got going on, where do we want to send them to?
I will start. We'll let Luke wrap it up. You can find me. Just go to theconguy.com. That's CON. We are not con men. It's con as in Comic Con, right? The convention. So theconguy.com. You can find me at James D. Fry on Instagram or Jim Fry LA on Twitter. And Luke, where can they find you?
Yeah, again, just want to plug theconguy.com. We're both wearing shirts. And we have connected to all of our social medias through that network as well, and including podcasts, YouTube videos, all that. You can check us out. But we're also on a lot of podcasting platforms. I'll let Jim tell you those specific ones, but we're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, all those social medias. And my personal one I go off of is Cheese on Couch. That's kind of like my podcasting name. Cheeseman used to be on a couch, might eventually get back on a couch, but it still was a cool name. So I just kind of have continued to go. So Cheese on Couch on both Twitter and Instagram. And Jim, tell them about the podcasting.
Well, you can find our podcast. Our video podcast is on that hashtag show, their YouTube channel. And you can find us on our own YouTube channel, The Con Guy and The Scare Guy. But you can find our audio podcasts anywhere you download podcasts, iTunes, Google, everywhere you get them. And then also on sci-fi.radio. What, Luke?
Is it on Spotify?
Yeah, we're on Spotify. Spotify's our main source for where our podcast goes first, and then it goes out from there. And then sci-fi.radio is like a 24-hour sci-fi radio online network. We're also on there. And we hope to go out even further.
You guys are everywhere. All right.
That's
I'm going to make
right.
sure we're going to get these links in the show notes so people can just click over rather than have to go do all that hunt and peck, right? But they'll find you if they want to, and I'm sure they're going to want to. Again, Luke, Jim, I definitely appreciate you coming on and hanging out tonight.
This has been a pleasure, and thank you so much, Tracy. You have been very persistent in trying to get in touch with us because we're not the best at responding. So thank you so much for getting us on today.
It's been my pleasure. I had to have you guys on. I knew it was going to be a great geek out.
Yep.
Hope to see you at a con someday.
Yep.
Oh, definitely.
All right.
Well, there you have it, my Dark Horse friends and family. Jim Cheeseman and Luke Fry, the con guys, dropping geeked out bombs on us in this episode. What resonated with you? Man, there was a lot in this episode. This episode actually ran a little long, but I want to give you a couple ideas that resonated with me that might have flown under your geekdar, okay? Thought number 1, do not be afraid of the competition. Right out of the gate was when Jim was telling his origin story about how they wanted to create a space where fans could come together and share their passions, their opinions, their thoughts, their fandoms. Of course, right, like so many of us, they were met with, oh, everyone has a website or a podcast or a this or a that. But he brought up a great point. Most of these landing pads for fans tend to disappear in a very short period of time, leaving them hungry once more for a stable place where they could come and share their passions with others. That is why they started their spot, theconguys.com. And you see, and their podcast. Let's not forget their podcast. Sorry, I stumbled on something. My brain was getting ahead of my mouth. I wasn't quite keeping up. But here's the deal. If you are a part of a passionate group of people and you see a hole in how they're being serviced, then get in there and damn well fill it. Red ocean or blue ocean, it doesn't matter. If you can fulfill their need, you will build a long, loyal fan base that will tell others about your product, your service, your show, your website. Plus, there are a number of ways that you can stand out from the competition. Now, remember, I shared a number of those back in episode, 55, Standing Out from the Crowd. Plus, I want to share a few more in episode 288, Overlooked Ways to Stand Out from the Competition. Thought number 2, broaden your horizons. Luke shared how across his scholastic career, he kept adjusting to things that were happening in his life. For example, he shifted from his arts focus to a more athletic focus in his high school years, right? Not a strange thing for a red-blooded American boy in the Midwest to do, not at all. But then he got a football concussion, so he was sent back onto his arts path. This and his drawing got him a scholarship, got him into college, and he got in based on illustration. He wanted to study graphic design, but he focused on photography because this gave him the flexibility to study design and photography. Then added a few, 4 more classes to that, and he could major in film, which fed his passion that he'd had since an early youth. So, as you can see, if he would have been so rigidly focused on one thing without being willing to adjust to his life's experiences and his life's passions, he might have been nothing more than a failed football player versus living his passion in film. This is one of the things that many folks miss when they're on their way to becoming successful. I'm going to share a few more in episode 289, things that you should do to become a successful entrepreneur faster. Thought number 3, what gives you that childlike twinkle? Luke reminded us that we need to remember and even hold on to those things that give us that childlike twinkle in our eyes. Oh man, so often, right? We're out there, we're grinding away, we're making a living, and we're providing what we need to for ourselves, first off, right? And those that we care for. And we're just out there grinding so hard that we forget to recharge that twinkle in our eyes. How has that twinkle in your eyes faded? Has it, right? Do you need to start, restart, or kickstart that sparkler in your eye? What would do it for you? For me, I mean, there are so many things. I think a deep conversation with my wife always fires me up inside, puts a twinkle back in my eye. Coming up here and playing my drums, I do at least a couple times a week, reignites the flame. Seeing an eagle, man, oh my gosh, I'm like a little kid every time that happens. Doesn't matter whether it's up in the sky or in a tree. The closer the better, obviously. And sometimes it's just reading something moving or motivational that can reignite the twinkle in my eye. What will light the fire in your eye, right? Whatever it is, get out there and get to it. Give it to you so that you can continue to give that twinkle in your eye out to those that you serve. Thought number 4, try variations of a success. Now, Jim and Luke did not call this one out directly, but I wanted to make sure it did not go unnoticed. So they started their endeavor that blew up and it reached a level of success, the con guy. So did they take that happily and rest on their laurels? Not no, but hell no. They started the scare guy, the con girls, the con kids, and the tiki freaks, to name a few, right? So they found a winning formula and leveraged that formula into 5 niche arenas serving a passionate crowd that they resonate with. So here's the thing. When you find a level of success, get that product or service to a point where it's running on near autopilot, just humming on all 8 cylinders. Then use that magic formula that you found to create a variation, let's say, of your success for a sub-niche of your passionate audience, just like Jim and Luke have done. Man, and there are so many more lessons and tips and geek moments. Let's just be honest, in geek moments in this particular episode. What cool ideas, inspiring tips, or titillating thoughts resonated with you today? Whatever they were, take some time as soon as right now. Right now would be a great time. And write them down. Then get out there, put them into action. That's right. Get out there. Run your race, get your results, and then come let me hear about them. Seriously, email me at tracy@darkhorseschooling.com. Share the tips or ideas that you come away with, how you put them into action, and what results you gain from them. Good, bad, ugly, up, right, left, down, who cares? Probably even bring you on the show and let you share your story and your business. All right, now, our next interview episode guest is Mike Michalowicz. Now, in his new marketing book, Get Different, which I'm about halfway through at this point, Mike offers a proven no bullshit method to position your business, service, or brand to get noticed, to attract the best prospects and convert those prospects, those opportunities into sales. You're going to want to hear Mike's unique viewpoints and rib-tickling ideas as he shares them in this episode. Now, I know you're going to keep getting all these valuable tips and awesome stories from the folks I'm lucky enough to bring on this show. So please go on down there, hit that subscribe button. While you're there, leave us a 5-star rating and write a quick review. That's right. Leave your comment. Ask questions. Leave comments of concern. I read every single one of those reviews. And of course, do not keep all this entrepreneurial GOLD all to yourself. Share this podcast with other entrepreneurs and business owners that you know would get value from it. And with that, I'm going to leave you as I always do. Think successfully and take action.
Thank you for listening to the Dark Horse Entrepreneur Podcast.
You know this!
Thanks for tuning in.
Check us out at www.darkhorseschooling.com.
All right.
My name is Tracy Brinkman.